Hello, my dear friends. Today we will read the true life story of a British sailor who was involved in the last battle of the British G-class destroyer HMS Glowworm. It was built for the Royal Navy in 1936. On April 8, 1940, it was sunk in the course of an unequal battle with the German heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper to the west of Trondheim. The courage of the British sailors impressed the German captain of the cruiser Admiral Hipper so much that he sent a letter through the Swiss Red Cross with a description of the battle to the British Admiralty, recommending to award the crew of the British destroyer. This video is sponsored by a free online game, World of Warships. The types of warships that are presented in this video are of course available in the game too. World of Warships is not just a game, it's a floating digital museum displaying breathtaking recreations of not just the most fearsome vessels of the First and Second World Wars, but also many blueprints and designs of ships that never saw battle. These ships have been given new life in the game's virtual dockyards. New content is released every month, whether it's new ships, in-game nations, cosmetics, or even ship classes. You can always count on enjoying fresh gameplay experiences in World of Warships' stunning 12v12 arenas. During registration, use the code WARSHIPS to get exclusive rewards including a bunch of doubloons, credits, premium account time, and a free ship after you complete 15 battles. Believe me, 15 battles are not enough to enjoy the amazing graphics of the game. Dynamic weather effects and historically genuine ships from 10 countries will immerse you in the atmosphere of incredible naval battles. Experience new emotions with World of Warships. Well now, let's begin. On the morning of April 8, 1940, the Glowworm, in dense fog, faced the German destroyers Z-11 Bernd von Arnim and Z-18 Hans Ludemann. The destroyers were both part of a German naval detachment led by the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, escorting German forces for the invasion of Norway. The Glowworm opened fire and the German destroyers made an attempt to disperse, while requesting reinforcements. The Admiral Hipper reacted to the request shortly after. From the Hipper, it was initially hard to distinguish the Glowworm from the von Arnim, but 8 minutes later, they opened fire from a distance of 8,400 meters, using their main caliber. The Glowworm was overwhelmed by the Hipper's fourth salvo and was damaged. The vessel ceased fire attempting to break visual contact with the Hipper, but the Hipper was equipped with radar. When the destroyer came out of the smokescreen, the distance was short to fire the cruiser's 10.5-centimeter guns. The radio cabin, bridge, and bow 4.7-inch gun were all destroyed. And the destroyer was also hit in the engine room, commander's cabin, and finally the mast. The mast crashed, causing a short circuit, turning on the vessel's siren. At 10:10 a.m., the destroyer fired a 5-torpedo salvo from a range of 800 meters, but all torpedoes were failed. The destroyer ran through its smokescreen to gain time and prepare a second torpedo salvo, but the Hipper chased the Glowworm through the smokescreen in an effort to knock it out before it had time to fire the remaining torpedoes. The two vessels had gotten extremely close when the Hipper came out of the smokescreen, and the British captain decided to ram. The clash broke off the bow of the Glowworm, while the rest of the ship slid along the board of the Hipper, ripping its hull. As a consequence of the clash, one German sailor was pushed off overboard. About 500 tons of water entered the Hipper before the leaks were localized. The Glowworm was on fire, and its boilers exploded at 10:24. The Hipper began rescuing its sailor overboard and the remaining survivors. The German sailor was never found, but 40 British sailors were brought on board. The captain of the British vessel fell off the lifeline and drowned. As I mentioned before, under the impression of the courageous efforts of the Glowworm, the captain of the Hipper sent a letter through the Swiss Red Cross with a description of the battle to the British Admiralty, recommending an award. This submission resulted in Captain Roop being awarded the Victoria Cross posthumously. Lieutenant Ramsey, the only surviving officer of the Glowworm, was awarded the Distinguished Service Order. Bert Ginger Lohman was a 19-year-old stoker mechanic on the Glowworm. He was knocked out and badly injured during the fighting. He now lives in retirement in Havant. Bert takes up the story on the morning of April 8, 1940. At 7:45, the alarm bells went for action status. I was supposed to be on watch at 8 o'clock, but once you go into action, you stay where you are. I went to the petty officer's mess as an ammunition supplier, where the number 2 gun support was situated. It was those 15 minutes that saved my life, because I know my boiler room got blown out of the ship. If I had been on watch at the time, I wouldn't have been here now. I often think of the poor devil that was down where I should have been. A shell exploded in the petty officer's mess, but luckily it exploded on the other side of the gun support. The concussion knocked me out. When I came to, I found that the back of my left hand was gone, and I had shrapnel in my left arm and leg. The floor of the petty officer's mess was covered in blood. It looked like a butcher's shop. I felt the ship listing over. She was going down. I began sliding down with it. I managed to crawl to the other side and up on deck. I remember seeing one of our stokers running along the lifebelt lockers. He didn't seem to be injured. I didn't know what happened to him, but he didn't get picked up. Just as I got in the water, she heaved right over, and I got caught up in ropes and wires underwater. I thought to myself that I've had it now. I struggled, and all of a sudden my head popped out of the water. I could see she was about to go down, so I swam as hard as I could to get away from her, as I didn't want to get sucked down. I could feel myself being drawn back. Eventually, I managed to get away from her. I was swimming with one leg and one arm, heading towards the Hipper. I was one of the last to leave the Glowworm. I was lucky that I didn't swallow any oil when I was in the water. There were about 3 or 4 inches of oil on the surface of the sea. I know a lot of chaps swallowed it, but as my mouth and nose became blocked with it, I put my head underwater below the layer of oil and cleared it. I kept doing this until I got picked up. The Germans put a rope over the side with a loop in it. At first I grabbed it with my good arm, but halfway up I didn't have enough strength to hang on, so I let go and went back into the water. They put it down again, so this time I put my right arm through the loop and I tucked it under my left armpit. As they pulled me up like that, I could feel my arm coming out from under my armpit. I thought that I would let go again before they could get a hold of me. Just at the last minute, as I began to let go, I could feel hands on me and blacked out. The next thing I remember, I woke up in a bunk in the German sickbay, and there were a couple of German sailors rubbing me down with towels, getting all of the oil off of me. They congratulated us on a good fight. I didn't realize we had rammed the Hipper until the other chaps told me later on. We must have injured a lot of them in the battle, as I looked to another part of the sickbay, which was full of German sailors. Somebody told me that during the action Captain Roop's dog was sitting between his legs and was killed by shrapnel, but he wasn't touched. The next morning I was fast asleep when all of a sudden their guns started firing, which were right outside the sickbay. One of the stewards came in who could speak perfect English. I asked him what was going on. He told me not to worry and that one of our ships had been sighted, but it wouldn't give them any trouble. I asked him if he knew which ship. He replied that it was the Renown. On hearing this, I waited for the whistle of the shells to come over, as I knew that the Renown's 15-inch guns had a longer range than the Hipper's, but the Hipper managed to escape in the bad weather conditions. Back at home, my sister was listening to Lord Haw Haw, who announced that I was one of the survivors of the Glowworm, and she went rushing around to tell my mum and dad, who thought I was dead, as they had heard that the Glowworm had sunk with all hands. As a POW, I was separated from the other survivors, and spent a lot of time at Stalag 13 in Poland. Most of the chaps in there were from the army. I mucked in with a survivor from the armed merchant cruiser, the Rawalpindi. We kept ourselves busy helping the officers to escape. The Germans didn't allow them out of the camp to work, so we used to swap clothes with them. Quite a few officers escaped this way. On one occasion, 3 of our mosquito fighters flew over the compound. The guard in the watchtower, although he wasn't supposed to, fired at them. One of them broke off and flew straight at the tower, as if to say to the guard, "So you want to play, do you?" The mosquito pilot aimed and fired his guns, killing the guard, so that all the bullets landed outside the compound away from us. Towards the end of the war, we were woken up one night by the Germans in a terrible panic. We were told to move there and then. When we asked why, they replied, "Ruskies." It appeared that the Russians weren't very far from our camp. We said we wouldn't leave without our large supply of Red Cross parcels. We managed to find some carts, which we loaded up with them. I was glad we did, as the parcels kept us alive in the following march into Germany, during which many of us died. After the war, I retired from the Navy with the injuries I got on the Glowworm, but I still managed to keep fit by joining a cycling club for many years. Well, let me remind you that if you want to immerse yourself in the atmosphere of amazing naval battles, then play World of Warships. During registration, use the code WARSHIPS to get exclusive rewards, including a bunch of doubloons, credits, premium account time, and a free ship after you complete 15 battles. Happy hunting, Captain!